Let me flag here a real problem is not really the availability of resources or other thing, but also not even the capacity, but it is the consumption pattern that I'll be talking. Our generation capacity is more than 46,000 megawatt. A base load, which mainly is during the winters, is around 10 to 12,000 megawatt. And the peak load last August, we touched about 30,000. This year, it was under 26,000. So this brings us to the conclusion with the base load of 10,000 and 30,000 peak load, we have a summer cooling load of 20,000. Now, this is the real problem. And as we proceed further, I'll be talking more about this.
The problem is that of capacity charges. Even, we are moving toward indigenous solutions. It mean, and then solar and wind energy and others. So it means that it can cater only the daytime demand, but at the night, again, we have to depends on the system.
Magnesium oxide boards or panels for partition and even outer walls, I think, is a very good choice. And heat-proof elastomeric coatings, even for the roof, some people are doing today. That again would probably will be in greater demand because of the insulation requirements. And geothermal heat pump is another area that I think the local industry can very easily manufacture. There's no big technology into this.
Assalamualaikum everyone. On behalf of Dr. Nadeemul Haq, Vice Chancellor at PIDE, I welcome you all in a webinar on a very important topic, energy conservation in the domestic sector. We are dependent on imports for 40% of our energy needs, and domestic sector's share in the total energy consumption is more than 20%. Almost 48% of electricity and more than 24% of gas is consumed in the domestic sector, mainly for heating and cooling purposes. So conserving energy in this sector is extremely important to use the available energy resources in more productive activities. Today, it's a pleasure to have with us Brigadier Muhammad Ashraf. He has done a lot of work in this area. So without wasting any time, over to you, Brigadier Saab. Please tell us about it.
Thank you, Dr. Afia. I'm so grateful to PIDE for their support and making it possible for me to speak to this community. I've been looking into energy conservations for some time. And what I found was that probably a very different approach is needed to address the crisis. And I've been discussing this with many people. And what I'm going to share with you it's really exciting. It's very unconventional, but I think it is in conformity with our weather conditions, our building practices, and our needs. So, and also this has the impact on the individual homeowners who probably would be very relieved to have very low energy cost, paying for their living very comfortably. At the national level, as Dr. Afia has just mentioned, we have a serious crisis which is going to get worse with the passage of time because of the wrong energy pattern, consumption pattern, which I am going to touch. And at the global level, I think the biggest concern, which we have not even started talking, is on account of the climate change. And that, again, I'll touch briefly before I start giving the solution that I have today. So with this, I think let's start the proceedings. I'll be targeting, of course, the mitigation of Pakistan's energy crisis, which is pretty serious. And then also looking at possible solution of what I'll be talking and in relation to the climate change challenges. And in the end, we are targeting cost-effective and comfortable housing at affordable expenditure for everybody in Pakistan and the region. This has relevance, of course, within Pakistan, but beyond Pakistan. And I think about 60 to 70% of the global population in the temperate and the warm climate probably can benefit from the concept that I am presenting today. So with this, I'll be talking in these three stages. Initially, I'm going to touch upon the energy crisis to find out what is the root cause of this and what is the main trigger. And then I will switch to our energy environment, in which I'll be talking basically on the passive energy, which has not been receiving the attention it has, and that holds the key to our addressing our energy crisis and also climate change crisis. And then at the end, I'll share my ideas how to go about it and how to proceed achieving these targets. Now, talking of the energy crisis very briefly, what I feel is that in Pakistan, we have abundant energy resources, but most of them are unexploited. And therefore, we are facing this problem that we all know it is. And also, as far as the power generation is concerned in sector, more than 50% reliance is on the imported fuels, oil and LNG. And that has recently hit us very badly when the dollar was down and the IMF conditionalities didn't allow the government to offer any subsidies. So we've seen a spike in the rise of tariff. And as the demand is growing, so this situation is going to get worse with the passage of time. I'll be explaining it slightly later. So let me flag here our real problem is not really the availability of resources or other thing, but also not even the capacity, but it is the consumption pattern that I'll be talking. Our generation capacity is more than 46,000 megawatt. A base load, which mainly is during the winters, is around 10 to 12,000 megawatt. And the peak load last August, we touched about 30,000. This year, it was under 26,000. So this brings us to the conclusion with the base load of 10,000 and 30,000 peak load, we have a summer cooling load of 20,000. Now, this is the real problem. And as we proceed further, I'll be talking more about this. Now, this didn't occur just out of blue. In fact, in 1990, if you look at it in red, the industrial consumption was higher than the domestic consumption. And that generally is the practice and the pattern all over the world. But as the time passed, the housing sector started growing. And as a result, by year 2017, the domestic consumption was double compared to the industrial consumption. And this year, the electricity consumption in the domestic sector was 51%, and it is forecasted to rise by another 4,000 megawatts over the next 5 years. So we have here a very large consumption in the domestic sector, which is not the pattern anywhere in the world. Pakistan happens to be the only country where domestic consumption exceeds industrial consumption. And this is, if you study the pattern, I've studied about 45 years pattern, and this is, we are the only country which is following this curve. And because of this, the problems are there. And these problems, just look at India and you find the domestic consumption in orange line is 24%, whereas we had 46%. This is 2019 figure. Industrial consumption is reverse. In India is diverting about using 42% of the electricity in the industrial sector, and 27, we are using 27%. And likewise in the other sectors, the equation is more or less similar. So we see that our consumption in the domestic sector is excessively high compared to any other country. Another example is here, if you compare with USA, where the base load is 153,000 plus compared to 10,000 in Pakistan. The summer peak load is just 550 megawatt more than the base load, whereas we have 20,000 more compared to the base load. And their cooling load is only 5.5% of the base load, and we have 200%, 3 times more than the base load. And all of this, bulk of this is going into the housing sector in the domestic sector, because the consumption in the industrial sector, in the transport sector, agriculture, or commercial sector remains more or less steady throughout the year. The fluctuation occurs only in the domestic sector. And that is where we have to identify the problem is the consumption, very high consumption in the uh, in the domestic sector. Now, if you look at the IPPs, and we have 41 thermal IPPs, which are generating about 17,642 megawatt electricity. So in the winters, obviously, when the demand is not there, the state is obliged to pay them the capacity charges at 62% of their generation capacity. Likewise, in winters, since there are thermal IPPs, they're dependent on the imported fuels. So this year, because of the dollar Pakistani rupee parity and also the IMF issue, the cost of the fuel was very high, and accordingly, the tariff had to be raised to the level that we are paying today. Also, we have 8 hydro IPPs, and 472 megawatt is their output. And during winters, of course, most of it is unutilized. And again, the government has to pay the capacity charges. And this all is because of the seasonal demand in the domestic sector, because in all other sectors, the demand remains more or less uniform throughout the year. Now, with this, I think if you look at it, how it's behaving now and what problem it is creating, 20,000 megawatt seasonal cooling load, we are paying over 2 trillion capacity charges per year. The circular debt recently has risen to about 2.31 trillion. We need another 4,000 megawatt in the next 5 years, and that will entail an investment of about $8 to $10 billion. I don't think the Pakistan has that kind of money, so it has to be an IPP arrangement. And again, the capacity charges are going to mount. So if now we have about 51% capacity charges, it's going to be in 5 years' time about 65% of the consumption in the domestic sector, 60 to 65, and that triggers the capacity charges, which are going to be beyond, I think, manageable limits. Either the tariff has to be risen, maybe twice than what it is today. And in any case, it's going to affect our industry and every other sector which is related to economy. So clearly, the problem lies in the excessive consumption in the domestic sector and 20,000 megawatt summer cooling load that we are having today. So naturally, the answer is we have to curtail domestic consumption. And if we are able to do something in that area, we would be able to divert the surplus supply to industry, agriculture, and transport sector, where the demand throughout the year is uniform, and that obviates the need of the capacity charges, and that brings down the cost of the energy, and that then can be passed on to the industrial consumer and also the other consumers, which in turn should, I think, improve the industrial output and help the economy. But if we are not doing that and we are maintaining the rate at which the domestic consumption is growing, then obviously the industry is going to suffer and also the economy is going to suffer. Now the question is why we have such an excessive consumption in the domestic sector. And that will lead us to finding the solution and working out the options. I have taken a very basic main ingredients of this problem. The first in the list is the building material that we use, shown here in the red, have the highest thermal conductivity amongst all the construction material that the world is using today. Now, as a result, 70 to 78% of the energy is transferred and stored in the building structure, and mostly RCC, bricks, and cement, and all those things. Now, also the other problem is of the thermal mass or thermal storage capacity of the construction material, which has if you take a 10 marla house, typical about 3,000 square feet, it stores something like 30 tons of energy, while an 8,000 square foot covered area house would store something like 65 tons of energy. And since our buildings are exposed to the weather and ambient at any given time, this much energy is stored in our building structure throughout the year. In summers, we have warmer houses, and winters we have cold houses. We cannot walk barefoot during winters on the floors, and we cannot live in the upper story, which is the worst hit of this very phenomenon because of the RCC roofs. So, and this in turn drives the consumption of the energy to a limit that we see today. So the impact is that we have warm houses in summers, cold in the winters, and our energy consumption is something like 20, forgive me for this figure, it's 20 times more compared to the Western passive house standards. So that is where the energy consumption is going on. And obviously, it's only a very small segment of the population which is consuming, and you mostly on in the air conditioners that they are operating. I think less than 8% or probably less than 20% of the population. So that is where all this energy and the trouble is started, and it's upsetting the entire equation. Another, I think, connected just issue is that we use a material which also has the highest build weight, and as a result, the dead weight of our building is excessively high, which triggers uh, extra use of cement, steel, and bricks in the foundation, columns, and the frame, and that has a cost effect and also limitation on that account. And because of the practices, we are using bricks and manual process and procedure. In the gray structure cost, you can see which is about 88% of the cost goes to the cement, steel, bricks, which and also which and the labor. So labor here is about 32% of the gray structure cost, which is excessively high. If we have some alternate methods which can reduce this thing, we'll find that the cost of the construction can also be brought down to about 25-30% quite easily. So maybe it's time to think of using panels and boards instead of bricks and blocks, and also some light steel frame instead of RCC columns and beams, and that obviously will reduce the construction cost and also bring down the cost. Now, so much as far as this is concerned, but let's now focus again on to energy. And now, having identified the problem in the that is the domestic sector is the root cause of our energy crisis, and why domestic in the housing industry, the construction material and the construction practices have created a bigger problem for us. Let's now look into the passive energy advantage that Pakistan enjoys very significantly over a lot of the countries in the world, especially Europe and the West. We have a huge availability of solar energy. Also, another area which has been neglected very sadly is the subsoil temperatures. In Pakistan, the subsoil temperature in the area where bulk of our population lives is between 23 degrees to 27 degrees. And this probably is the best thing that we can come to our rescue. And also the thermal storage capacity, which I've already talked because of the building material and the practices we use. Now, here is a map, and you can see clearly the Pakistan showing about 9 hours exposure of sun during day on the average, about more than 3,300 hours per year, which compares compared to the Europe and the other cold region is far more, about 2 times more than that. We also have subsurface temperature or subsurface energy, which is, as you can see here, Islamabad has about 23 degrees, Lahore 24.5 degrees, Wa and Karachi is 27 degrees. So these are the temperatures which actually are very comfortable throughout the year if we can leverage this temperature and some or the other able to use this and utilize this for heating and cooling, which I'm going to talk just after a few slides. Now, here is a picture of last year. And this site is Gulbarg Green, right next, right inside the Islamabad towards Rawalpindi. And what you see here is a picture of the borehole of the bore, which was about 250 feet deep into the ground. And the temperature during winters at the borehead was 21.6 degrees, and summer it is 22.8 degrees, so about 1.2 degrees difference. And that is right here in Islamabad, and that is kind of the temperature that we have, the subsoil temperature that I'm talking. Now, once again, I've talked about the thermal storage capacity that our buildings have in the superstructure and also in the foundation. So we have three things. We have abundant of solar energy, we have unlimited subsoil energy, and we have a huge thermal storage capacity in our superstructures and in our building. So if somehow we can do something that allows us to transfer this energy, subsoil energy, into the building its structure itself, the building will act as a kind of a thermal storage or thermal battery, and that will be at a temperature which is most desirable, which is 23 degrees. We are talking about Islamabad. And to make this transfer possible, if we use our next big advantage, that is the abundance of the solar energy, now that unlocks the potential for cutting down the energy consumption and the cost as far as the domestic sector is concerned. The idea is to transfer and store subsurface temperatures, 23 degrees, about 23 degrees in Islamabad and 27 in Karachi, in the building superstructure for year-round cooling and heating without relying on the grid electricity. Now, what we'll need here would be a small, a fully integrated envelope, insulated envelope around the building, which creates a barrier between the weather or the ambient temperatures and the building itself. So there is no transfer of outside weather, outside temperature into the building, and likewise, whatever temperature you are maintaining the building, it will not be lost. And then and this can be powered by a very small 4 to 5 kilowatt standalone solar system, which will be running few motors and blowers. And depending on the medium that you are using, air or water, it will slowly and gradually start transferring the subsoil temperature into the building, which we have already concluded has a massive storage capacity. And once the building has been primed in about 2 weeks' time that we had been simulating, 2 to 3 weeks, thereafter, it will only need to recharge the system or whatever energy has been lost. And that, I think, 9 hours a day or 8 hours a day is more than enough temperature that will be available to us. Now, before I come to the solution part, I would like to draw your attention to this very interesting slide. It is about Arizona, where, of course, we know central heating and central air conditioning systems are working. And here in this very house, was the outside temperature is 45 degrees. The consumption is about 7 kilowatt per hour. But once the temperature drops to about 25 degrees centigrade, the consumption reduces to 1 kilowatt per hour. So that essentially is, if the outside temperature and the inside temperature, the difference is very low. Obviously, the consumption, energy consumption of the heating and cooling devices drops very substantially. So with this, I would like to draw your attention to another aspect, and then we move to the solutions. Now, this is a map on the left, which shows two places, Ras Al Khaimah and Jacobabad, which have 32 degrees wet bulb temperature. And that is not throughout the year, but at occasion it is there. Here is German research which shows that by year 2020, the wet bulb temperature in this area, which is in India, Pakistan, and South Asia region, will hit, and it will affect about 30% of population which may not be able to survive, because once the wet bulb temperature rises to about 32 degrees centigrades, what happens is that the body, the sweat that is coming out, it doesn't get dry, and the internal heat start building up, and that results in heat stroke and other issues. And the person may not be able to survive more than few hours. So that is the kind of a challenge that we have, and we all been hearing about the climate change. And today, I think COP28 is starting, and I think this could be one of the area that we should be watching. And this the solution that we are proposing, obviously, it curtails the use of fossil fuel, and which is the main trigger to the global warming, and also the domestic sector. The housing sector is the one which is maximum contributor to the global warming, and that is the area that we can address through passive energy. This map also shows how the situation is developing in this region. Now, coming to some of the thoughts on the solution and how to go about it. So obviously, we have a large number of houses and very adverse energy consumption going on, and it would be, I think, sensible to start with the conversion of the existing houses through retrofitting, so that the energy consumption can be brought down. Along with that, the new construction, if the government is able to see a logic and rational, we have to devise some building codes and modify some construction practices, so that the energy consumption in the new construction is brought down to about 80 to 90%. So coming down to the conversions, now here is the simplest that we can do is, if any building or any house which has few air conditioners or heaters or whatever it is, if we are to supply the air to the outer unit of the air conditioner, if it is drawing from the ambient about 40-45 degrees, instead of this, if we can channelize this temperature, which here is 23 degrees, and allow the air to pass through this, and then obviously 40-degree temperature can easily be brought to about 27-28 degrees. That will reduce the energy consumption from probably 5 kilowatt per hour to 1 kilowatt per hour, or even lower in our case. And this then goes through the air conditioner, which now is operating at drawing an air about under 30 degrees centigrade. So difference is about 4 to 5 degrees. So this will have, I think, immense efficiency increase, and we expect about 30% of energy consumption can be lowered. Besides, the air compressor would not be operating at extreme performance, and at the lower performance, once it is doing, its life also is going to increase by 2 to 3 times. So that is an advantage, and this probably won't entail much of an expenditure also. So easily about 30% of the target can be achieved within the given arrangement. An improvement of it is that if we just do the paneling, inside paneling, and with some insulation in the building, especially towards the walls that are facing the sun, this will prevent the loss of energy into the building, because we are already concluded about 80 to 90% of our energy is lost to the superstructure because of the high thermal conductivity and high thermal mass and thermal storage capacity of the building. So that this can also add to about 10% more saving. To about 40% of the saving can be achieved by these very cost-effective and simple arrangements. I think the ultimate that we can do is to put an insulated envelope around the building, roof and walls, and this will effectively eliminate the impact of the weather on the building, and also whatever temperature that you maintain inside the building will not be lost to the building. And in this case, of course, the air conditioners are already there. They are operating at improved efficiency, all that, and they operate during daytime, powered by the solar energy, preferably. And this temperature is then retained by the building. And we have said about 65 tons in 8,000 square feet, and about 30 tons in a 3,000 to 4,000 square feet covered area. And this will allow you to store the energy. So at night time, the heating and cooling will not be through the air conditioning. Maybe a fan would be needed to circulate the air, because already your building would be at a temperature which will be very close to the subsurface temperature. And so here is basically the additional thing is that we are storing the energy in this building. And that we estimate would save up to about 50% of the energy cost and maybe about 3 years payback time. New construction obviously is an area which is going to be more offering us more opportunities. And if we just take back about 3,000 square foot area where we have 30 tons storage capacity, it's the building is fully insulated from the outside. So, and the solar energy, the sun which is there, and if you just put a small 4 to 5 kilowatt solar panel, standalone solar panel, it doesn't have to be on the grid metering or anything else. And this powers some blowers or some motors, which is pushing, basically transferring the energy subsoil temperature into the building temperature, which is insulated, and it has about 30 tons storage capacity. So after a few weeks, 1 or 2 weeks, we will have this building about 20 to 24, 26-degree temperature, whatever temperature is there. And in case there is some additional supplementary cooling or heating is required, that can be done during daytime using the solar energy, not the grid energy or electricity. And that will ensure that the building has now a thermal storage of the to its full capacity. And once it is charged, this can last about 3 days, up to 3 days. And that probably translates into very no electricity being consumed for heating or cooling, and the electricity that you require would be for the appliances, lights, and fridge, TV, and other things. So this probably would be the ultimate where we can achieve up to 90% energy savings if we build the homes according to this thing. Now, I was comparing it with the passive house standard, which is the Western model, and where passive house basically consume something like 15 kilowatt hours per square meter in 1 year. So annual consumption is about 15 kilowatt hours per square meter. And in a modern house, which is not compliant with this standard, it consumes about 10 times more. And a leaky house, which is not insulated properly, more like ours homes, would be about 20 times more energy will be consumed there. So we are standing here, or maybe worse than this, because we also store our superstructure stores the energy, and that creates the problem also for us. So if we are to adopt to the concept that I am proposing, we will have, I think, results better than the passive house standards, because we are using free solar energy, solar and the subsoil temperature energy, and storing into the building, which already has a very huge thermal storage capacity. So this can be, I think, a model which will be applicable to all the warm and the temperate regions in the world, not only restricted to Pakistan. So I think towards the end, I would say that the opportunities that I see here is about 25% up to 25% lower construction cost. We can also have the construction possible if we are using a little bit of modification in the construction materials that I've talked. In 6 months' time, I think it would be perfectly possible to build a house, and up to a 90% energy savings in the energy in the energy consumption. And you'll probably not need any, but if you do, then it will be very fewer heating and cooling appliances, which also be, I think, saving a lot of upfront costs that we spend, and then we cannot utilize it properly. The retrofit options or the conversion option, I've said, again, has a potential of 30 to 50% energy consumption, saving in the energy consumption, and payback period of short about 3 years' time. Also, I think it will open up some new interesting product, material, and services opportunities. It could be low-cost insulation sheets, boards, and insulation tiles. Wall cladding, roof insulation is another area which would probably needs to be focused, and solutions are to be found. And there are plenty of solutions available everywhere. Magnesium oxide boards or panels for partition and even outer walls, I think, is a very good choice. And heat-proof elastomeric coatings, even for the roof. Some people are doing today. That again would probably will be in greater demand because of the insulation requirements. And geothermal heat pump is another area that I think the local industry can very easily manufacture. There's no big technology into this. So these are some of the areas I think looking forward that we need to explore. So with this, I come to the end of my presentation, and you're most welcome to clarify your doubts and ask any questions.
Thank you so much, Brigadier Saab. Very informative, very interesting discussion. Before going to the floor, we have so many raised hands. I have two quick questions. In the first part of your presentation, you talked about the change in the consumption pattern of the domestic sector. Don't you think it has something to do with the tariff design, which we used to have in the electricity sector, that encouraged the more consumption in the domestic sector? And secondly, unless how to go about all this framework, unless we have a strict regulatory framework and its implementation, it is impossible to switch towards the more efficient building structures or to apply these building codes, etc. And in your opinion, what role NICA could play in this regard? Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. NICA has, I think, a very important role to play. I'm in touch with them, and they are very supportive of this idea. We are working with them, and hopefully, I think in very soon we'll start building some models which can be displayed, which can be then verified. And after that, I think the step would be of maybe incentives and enforcement of some new building codes and its enforcement. I think enforcement may not be very difficult thing because of the built-in incentive for the people who are consuming high energy and paying for a very high energy cost, which they cannot afford. So I think that part would be easy done than what we are thinking. The people have already shifting to solar energy consumption and putting in a lot of money there. And this probably is a much cheaper alternative. So I don't see that compliance would be a very challenging job. I agree with you. Over the past about 10, 15 years, or since 1990, the growth in the housing sector, which has gone and thoughtlessly, and we have been building homes which are consuming about 20 times more energy, and that has actually caused the problem. Even now, there are very few homes comparatively. There is smaller percentage which is using air conditioners excessively. But we have seen what a damage and that has caused to the overall energy situation in Pakistan. So that is something the policymakers and failure, because they were not able to foresee and they were not able to appreciate the priority that should have been given to the industrial sector and the other sectors which are productive sectors. So we are here, but luckily, I mean, I've been thinking for quite some time of going the Western way, but I don't think that is advantageous to us. We have much better proposition. And within the existing building materials with some modifications in the design, we can use our buildings for thermal storage and the subsoil temperature, which has one of the best situation in the entire world, especially in Islamabad. And that can be transferred and stored into the building using the solar energy, which again is free. So I think soon we are going to get involved into doing some models. And definitely, I think this discussion that we are initiating today will have its sequels. And as we go along, we'll try to keep the general public informed and also involve other organizations which are concerned with it. And obviously, PIDE definitely will be there. NICA, you have already mentioned, and other agencies concerned will also be there, inshallah.
Okay, great. So now I'll go to the floor. Shahid, please unmute yourself.
Thank you, Dr. Afia. Thank you, Ashraf Saab. This is the second time we are interacting, and the second very informative webinar that you've given on another important issue. I just have a few thoughts on this and a question. And already Dr. Afia asked that question, and one of that, it was about the mechanism and the institutional setup. And NICA obviously is a part of it, because we tend to only look at the supply side and not the demand side. So when it comes to the energy efficiency or the efficiency standard of our electrical appliances, I'm sure you'd agree that they are not the best in the world. In fact, they are some of the lowest in the world. Now, you might be very positive about, or you might be very optimistic about Nika, but unfortunately, I'm not, given their past performance. I mean, distributing stickers of efficiency, which cost, the government rate is 5 rupees, but then you are selling it under the table for 30 rupees. And I don't know if that is efficiency or what you call it, but let's hope things change. Second, this model of the sub soil temperatures that you're saying, is it already applicable in Pakistan, the model that you are prescribing? I mean, kahin pe ye Pakistan mein applicable hai, ghar is tarah ban rahe hain ke nahi ban rahe, or is it just for the future? Third, you said something about that we'd be needing like 4,000 megawatt more in the coming years. I mean, what's the basis of that estimation or demand? Like, we already know that we already have excess capacity, and we already have the system inefficiency issues. So what underlies that estimation that we'd be needing like 4,000 megawatt more in the future? And last but not the least, again, it when you say that we should be transferring more to the solar, I agree कि यहाँ पे solar का बहुत ज्यादा potential है, but again the system, हमने already अभी तक जितने experiment किए solar के, जो कायदे आजम solar park है भावलपुर में एक, it's producing some of the most expensive electricity in the world in terms of solar electricity. So I mean, वो पूरा एक, this is a very good you've come up with very good suggestions, but I do feel that implementing these suggestions would require a complete overhaul of the system. Without that, it won't work. Thank you.
Shai sir, bilkul, thank you very much for a very good question, and I share your apprehensions that you have expressed. But given all that is happening and the crisis that we are in today, where very little breathing space is left with the government and also with the consumers like you and me, who cannot afford to switch on our air conditioners as we should be. So there is a need, definitely, for looking into innovative solutions which are cost effective and which can get us out of this thing. So that I think compulsion that we have would probably be the strongest reason for conversion to this area. I'm as far as the estimates and everything is concerned, I'm also associated with the LUMS Energy Institute, which is playing a very good role in the energy conservation and setting the building codes and standards and so many other areas. So we are, in fact, pursuing this issue from multiple sides. Just yesterday, I had a very good conversation with one of the organizers in COP22, which is starting today. And he was, in fact, he called me after seeing on the Facebook the announcement for this webinar. And then he said, I wish we had discussed this about 15 days earlier, and this could have been a very interesting, I think, discussion in the COP28, which obviously cannot be this year. But this, I think we need much more deliberations onto this, much more discussion and awareness, especially of this area. Now you're talking your question about the subsoil temperature usage in Pakistan. Yes, luckily, I have a very good friend, a young youngster who is a graduate, who is done masters from the Georgia Tech in geothermal energy. He has been working in USA, and then he shifted to Pakistan some years back, and he is also a recipient of the National Excellence Award, and he has done some remarkable works, which includes a hostel of the Namal University in Niawali. Also, right now, he is doing this work in Gulberg Green, and the picture I showed you of the subsoil temperature at the borehole are his work. So we do have basic, I think, the awareness and the capacity and the capability actually to plan and push these things, but it will take a little more doing. And there are quite a few agencies who want to really go on to building some model structures based on this thought. And I'm very optimistic. It will be having all these issues, but once the demonstration has been there and is proved that this very thing, transferring of the subsoil temperature and storing it into the building mass is possible, which I believe is easily doable. Obviously, the merit will prevail, and then we'll find solutions how to address the problems that you have said. And that obviously lies outside my area of expertise or understanding. So there'll be, I think, better people than me who will be taking care of those areas. I am primarily concerned with the concept itself, its validation, and then putting it into the experiment, testing, generating the data. We have done this work through simulations, but actual, I think, is we are as I speak, we are planning a few ventures which will be both in the area of conversion of the existing buildings and also some starting with some new buildings. So I think good news should be there, and I may be able to update the audience after some time where we are going, because I want the other peoples to be involved into it, integrated into it, and then collectively we can come out with it. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Brigadier Saab. Next question, Dr. Angela Forum.
Assalamu alaikum. I'm Angela from PIDE. First of all, thank you so very much for this much informative session to know the measures that could be taken to curtail this much excessive domestic consumption of energy in Pakistan. However, I simply want to know what are the factors that are hindering to get energy efficiency in building sector in Pakistan.
Very
Thank you
interesting
so much.
question. I think, thank you, Doctor. Saab. I think if you look at how the construction system in Pakistan has evolved, the people I think who are responsible for this situation that we are in today, and we are the only country in the world doing this in the wrong way, is obviously the policymakers cannot be absolved of their responsibility and their failure, the industry itself, and the building industry, especially the housing sector and everything else, which is highly unregulated, and they have their own way of doing the things, which is very primitive. And since the academia is also not playing its role as far as the research and linking with the industry, or the industry linking with the academia, so we have landed ourselves into this mess. Otherwise, it's a simple common sense thing. I don't think there was anything which should have taken us so many years to discover that we have just 12 feet onwards in Islamabad a temperature of about 23 degrees for the next about 8 to 10 kilometers, which the nature has stored over the million of years. And every year, winters and summers, this cycle is this is an ecosystem which will remain there as long as the sun is there and the weathers are there. So I mean, if but some or the other, I've been reading a lot of research, even from India, Pakistan, and this region people. Everybody is getting into the geothermal energy, which is basically the heat emanating from the core of the earth, which is not our problem. It is the western region, the cold region's problem, because their subsoil temperature is about 5 to 10 degrees centigrade, which is useless. So they have to drill deep and go to the temperatures of about 150, 200 degrees, and then get the steam, put water there, get the steam to drive their turbines and everything else. We don't have that. We have just, I think, just 5 feet below our basements, we have this reservoir waiting for us, and we never used it. We have this building which has huge, immense storage capacity. Just few months back, MIT and Harvard have published their research, and they are talking of electrified cement, and which is basically a high conductivity cement. And that would be, since in the West the cement is used, or RCC is used only in the basements, so they are insulating their basements and storing the energy there, and that energy will be utilized in the superstructure, which is super energy efficient. Only about 5% wastage to the building, rest all is utilized internally. So we have a building here which has about 20 to 50 times more storage capacity. We have free energy right below our feet, subsoil temperature and sun. So if we cannot combine all these three together, then we are very extraordinary people really to be not doing that thing. So I think late, but it's never too late. I think this is an area which I find I'm very convinced that this will probably have dictate the future of the construction sector industry in Pakistan and also beyond. So I think we all should be working on this direction.
Thank you. Brigadier Sahab, before going to the raised hands, Dr. Abda Noreen is unable to use her mic, so she has some questions. Let me ask these. What long-term strategies or plans are being developed or envisioned to further enhance energy conservation efforts within the domestic sector in Pakistan? And how are these strategies aligned with national goals for sustainability and environmental conservation? And she has one more question. What incentives or programs exist to encourage households to adopt energy saving measures in Pakistan? Ji.
I think this question should be raised to the people who are sitting at the policymakers and other people. But nevertheless, I think this very idea, I think I have bounced on so many people who are in a position of authority, and they all seem to be very excited. And I do hope that once we have done the initial experiments and everything else, and done the necessary work that we are already started, there would be, I think, very favorable audience at the policy level and also at the industry level also. And definitely the consumer side would be most keen to come into it. So it's maybe another 6 months time that we should be talking about much more, I think, with more confidence, with more specific information. And this very talk probably will be joined with some people who are experts and more technical than me talking only about the conceptual side. So I'm definite this idea has the potential to actually grow, and given the situation that we have today, some or the other, we in Pakistan do not think display a foresight which is about 20, 50 years ahead. But once the crisis hits us, we do react, and that is the time I think it is the biggest stimulus that we have to get rid of this crisis that we is our own creation. So that to me is, I am looking at it, high tariffs is probably a biggest motivation force, and also the energy crisis and the direction in which we are going, where even increasing generation capacity creates a bigger problem for us. There was a question about having a surplus energy about 46,000 and consumption about 30,000, but then availability and all those things is a problem because the hydro energy is not available during the winter months, and likewise the cost of imported fuel also is another area, and the capacity charges on IPP arrangement. So all these things have been messed up very badly. And I was mentioning about the lumps. The Lumps Energy Institute is working day and night onto it, and I think hopefully these things are now being first time realized because of this effort that domestic sector is the problem area and that has to be addressed. And so far, you must have heard the recent NICA's building codes and everything else emphasizing energy consumption, but though those measures are really very limited, I think, application. Changing light bulb, LEDs, and all those things may affect about 5% of it. But I think much more needs to be done at the way I'm trying to put it. Because I mean, putting 8 air conditioners in a house and then putting a 25 kilowatt solar system and saying that we have saving about 50,000, 60,000 rupees per month, I don't think it makes a very good sense, especially in the PIDE forum, which actually is much more aware of these things. So I think that this kind of a solution, which is indigenous, which is related to our environment, climate, and the building practices, has a better, I think, chances of success. So let's hope and see, inshallah.
Okay, great. Soha, please unmute yourself and ask the question. Soha Tahreem.
Assalamu alaikum, sir. Soha from PIDE. Thank you so much for our presentation, and I completely agree with the potential of solar and other renewable that you tell about. But why? My question is that why would first utilize our already installed capacity instead of shifting to renewables. No doubt renewables are good, but as we know that our contemporary situation of our economy, it's quite challenging in terms of infrastructure and investment. And my second question is and comment is like, if we look at the current installation status of solar PV is mostly by affordable class, or we can say that upper middle class. So don't you think it's closely related to affordability, or we can say affordability for all, or it actually increasing cost or burden shifting to poor? And my third question is, some buildings are already being solarized by government and some other institutions. So do you have any pre and post analysis of them in
Thank
terms
you
of
so much
cost and
for
other?
Thank you
Thank
so
you so much.
I do not have those analysis to start with, but my colleagues do have, and I think in the next session we'll probably bring those aspects. Today, the focus was on explaining the concept only. I'm not really saying that we need to minimize or lower or curtail our generation capacity. No, we may have we need much more generation capacity than and much more potential than what we have, and I believe we must exploit that. But we do not have to utilize that in the unproductive way in the domestic sector. By all means, double the generation capacity, which we have more than enough potential, and use that energy in the industrial sector, in the transport, in agriculture and other areas and commercial sector, which basically drive the economy. And there you do not have this seasonal demand and capacity charges problem. Domestic sector is a different thing. It has a different behavior pattern. In winters it doesn't consume, in summers it consumes about 3 times more. So we have to find ways that this very consumption the is brought down to the level where the world is practicing. We have seen, I've shown you a slide on India where the domestic consumption are and Indian domestic consumption. I've also talked about the cooling load in the US, which is only about 550 megawatt compared to 20,000 of ours, though their consumption and per capita consumption is about 50 times more than that. So we, by all means, we need to have, and we know how the industry is suffering, how the we are not able to provide cheaper, affordable energy to our agriculture sector. So if we can cut down on the capacity charges and divert this very energy and give them more energy, the cost automatically will come down, because there is a huge overhead of capacity charges in our case because of the seasonal demand of the domestic sector.
Vadulanjum.
Thank you very much. In fact, it's a really wonderful presentation. And I really like it very much, especially the indigenous solution which has been proposed here. But I believe that all these solutions are in the long run, but in the short run, really, because it's quite difficult to develop or invest, huge investment for infrastructure. So second, the problem is that of capacity charges. Even, we are moving toward the, indigenous solutions. It mean, and then if solar and wind energy and others. So it means that it can cater only the daytime demand, but at the night, again, we have to depends on the system. So it means that individually households can get benefit out of that, but at the government level, still we have to continue to pay the capacity charges. So, as long as really we need to revisit the policy about the capacity charges, that new contract that we are going to make, it should be not like this, that we must have to pay the capacity charges. We cannot get rid of that. The second issue, that as we are talking that industry should consume more, so that because industry is responding to the prices, as long as prices are too high, the industry has no capacity to absorb further expansion of electricity. So that is, again, that is, in fact, all these problems are correlated with each other. So if we are expecting from the industry that they should increase the demand, it means industry should expand. That is only possible when their businesses will be economically viable. So under given prices, I think they don't have capacity to expand their businesses. So that's our we end up with the capacity charges. So how to get rid out of that? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Badala sir. I fully support your concern, and that exactly is my point, which I have been talking. Let me reiterate, the capacity charges are primarily because of the excessive consumption in the domestic sector. In winters, the consumption is less. In summer, it is about threefold more. So in winter, we have to pay the capacity charges. In summers, we have to provide the fuel, about 51% imported fuel to these IPPs. And that creates this problem that we are in today. And we are the only country in the world which has more than twice consumption in the domestic sector compared to the industrial sector. In all other countries, the industrial consumption is far more than the domestic sector. Now, in domestic sector, the problem of the seasonal consumption is there, but that problem is not there in the industrial sector, in the transport, in the commercial sector, and agriculture sector. Now, some or the other, if we do not have this capacity, this fluctuation, our base load and the peak load, the difference is, let's say, about, if America has 550,000, we have about, let's say, the same 550,000 megawatt. So what you will be doing is that you will be not paying about 80% to 90% of the capacity charges, which is crippling the system. If you do not have to pay the capacity charges, the prices, the tariff will come down very drastically. And now the consumer would be industry, and they will be getting energy and electricity at much cheaper rates than they are getting now. And that was your contention, that they cannot afford to pay at a very high tariff that the industry is being charged today. But if you reduce the capacity charges by about 80 to 90%, the price of the energy automatically comes down. Then I think the industrialists will be too happy to use this energy, because now they have to go for their own captive power plants or generators and all those things, which is maybe 3 to 4 times more expensive than what the grid energy is being supplied to them. So I think it is the same thing, or the problem remains that our very excessive consumption in the domestic sector is the root cause of every problem. And if we can address that, some or the other, which the world has done, and which I am proposing, that we have a wonderful opportunity, because the way the passive energy availability and the huge storage capacity in our buildings. So I think that is the way I feel it can be done. There was a question also, I think I missed to answer, about day and night consumption. Now, let me answer it here. What I'm proposing is that we charge the house. Let's think it in terms of a thermal battery. A one canal house, 8,000 square feet, is a 65-ton thermal storage battery. Now you're charging it. The weather effect is being stored there, and that triggers the high consumption. But if the houses are insulated and we are storing the subsoil temperature or energy into our houses during daytime using the solar energy, and then at night time, once the houses are at a comfortable temperature, we would not require any energy consumption at night, except maybe some fans during summer, but no air conditioners I foresee. So that is where the consumption in the domestic sector is going to reduce. And I've already talked about the earlier aspect of capacity charges in industry, and I hope that explains.
Tariq Nadeem.
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam, Tariq sir.
Yes, Brigadier Saab, it's a very nice presentation, and you told about a few kind of insulation materials like PU and EPS, calcium sulfate boards, as well as magnesium oxide sulfate boards. So my question is on technical side, because I know so far this material, expandable polystyrene, is the cheapest one. And can we apply only EPS and no need of the PU and other boards, or we have to apply the PU also, or only PU is enough, or after insulation with PU foam, then we also have to add the other 2-3 materials, or only one material should be enough? This is my question.
Thank you, Tariq Saab. Basically, the problem which I foresee the PU foam and other, they are very expensive materials. And I think the per square foot cost is about 600 rupees plus, which is certainly is not affordable. And that is where I think there is a need for the industry to actually go for very cheaper insulation material solutions, which is possible. It's a very low and technology. And we have, for example, Pakistan has abundance of gypsum mines. We also have sulfur oxide and these deposits also there. So if we magnesium deposit also there in sufficient quantity, but gypsum obviously we have. So if we are using that and we are have the boards which are made of reinforced glass fiber reinforced gypsum panels, which India is using, by the way, very extensively. And those could be, I mean, and they claim about 30% lower cost and very short construction time and very good efficiency. So Pakistan has, I think, very high, one of the top 5 countries in the world with the huge gypsum deposits. So that could be an area where we can find some very cheap alternate to actually give us insulation. The idea I'm throwing is that we have the outer envelope which is insulated. Inside that, we have the building which has the ability to store a lot of energy. So I'm for maintaining, let's say, RCC floors and for the storage, and also maybe inner part of the wall of bricks or whatever it is, or some other material which can again store the energy. But it has to be insulated from the outside. And insulation, obviously, is not a rocket science anymore. And Pakistan is again in a very good position that we can come up with very cheap materials there. Probably, but since the demand is very less in Pakistan, so industry has not focused onto it. But imagine if the housing sector starts using insulation boards and panels, the demand is going to rise, and it will be, I think, much more. But at the moment, yes, we have to look forward. And if we move this in this direction, insulation, cheap insulation solutions definitely would be coming up. And I think there will be plenty of chances. We should not be having an issue into that. It's a very low end technology, plenty of raw material available, and nothing. I think not even much of investment is needed to make boards. Even now, the people are making these gypsum boards, and they are very cheap and using for the false ceiling and some of the other things. But that, I think, needs to be refined and built on a more scientific basis. If India can do it, we can do it better. And by the way, it was a Pakistani doctor, Dr. Shahid Qureshi, who introduced glass fiber reinforced gypsum board in India. Prior to that, 2 years prior to that, he came to Pakistan and he was offering free technology. But some of the other, there was no taker. And then India contacted him and he was able to do that. So there are choices available. He is willing. I think I talked to him a few times last year, and he is going to be here with the same thing, and he's willing to help us out into this thing. So there are plenty of things. I think the basic problem is we never thought of energy conservation. We never thought of energy efficiency in our homes. And some of the other, we kept building these houses the way we have been doing it. And that has landed us into this trouble.
So Brigadier Saab, sorry, there is a short question. So when you will be able to show us this first model? Because in your presentation you discussed that you are going to build a model house. So how soon we can see it and observe and feel that either it is a now as per our will or wishes, and so we can visit that place.
Thank you. I think that is where the start point is. There are two kind of models that we are thinking. One is the conversion model, which I for one think should be of a very higher priority because the bleeding is going on there. And along with that, the new construction. The new construction, if you start a house, I think it will take you about at least 1 year, maybe a year and a half to do that, and not many houses are going to be built from there. So naturally, the focus is on conversion, and we should be, I think, starting with the conversions soon. We're already in the planning stage, and we are into evolving some plans. There are 3, 4 different buildings that we are considering, and hopefully, I think Nika also was very generous. They offered their own building to be converted, which I think next week we'll be interacting with them. And hopefully, I think if we can find a solution to that, that probably would be a very good model at the national level to display. Also, we are in touch with someone who wants to convert a house in DHA Lahore, and we are already starting the planning onto that, and some also in Pindi, Islamabad. So hopefully, I think in 6 months' time, definitely, I expect the models for the conversion would be ready, and they will be tested, evolved, certified, and endorsed. And I cannot really give you a time frame, early time frame for the new construction models, but that I think within year and a half, I think we should have 2 to 3 new homes, which will again be going through the test procedure and all those things, and the model should be there. So that is, I think, the time frame I'm looking into it.
Yes, so thank you, Brigadier Saab. There is only one question, then the final question. So, what do you think the external factors are over there? So, like the electricity providers and the their stakeholders. So what would be the impact and what would be the response as in a reaction of your these efforts? If suppose if the our uh, the large people of the Pakistani, they are starting to build such kind of houses. So obviously these institutions and their stakeholders, they will suffer. So what would be the impact?
No, you are very right, and I've been thinking of these things because probably the air conditioning industry may not be very happy with us. Likewise, some of the other players, cement, steel, and all those things, because I am targeting to reduce their expenditure and consumption. But I think the biggest force is the demand. If we are able to provide the people who want to build the houses and they see an advantage, they will compel, and they have a choice eventually to go for this kind of house that we probably are proposing, or continue with the old houses. It will take its own time, but eventually, I think if the merit is there, the people will be looking into it and will be, I think, going in this direction. Number two is that the government is real and fixed. Our energy crisis and energy policy is in shambles, and they cannot address this crisis unless the domestic sector demand is curtailed very significantly. So they have to come up with the incentives and with concessions for the people to be encouraged to move into this direction. So those compulsions, the one is the incentive, which the homemakers are going to see the advantage, and secondly, the government, which is really neck deep into the energy crisis and getting deeper into this pit. And also, I think the industry and economy and everything else is suffering because of the lack of the cheaper or affordable energy for the industrial sector. So I think on the bigger side and also at the individual level, there is a case, and it should find the audience and the people who should be looking into it. I already have quite a few friends who are very interested, and they have even they want to start with their own houses on this very technology or this very concept. So hopefully, I think in about 6 months' time, conversion model, and within that time, we'd have done all the work, planning, and everything else for the new designs and everything else. So I think the next 1 or 2 sessions that we are going to have would be much more informative and talking of the specifics than a general talk that I am giving today. So anything else, Tariq sir? Thank you very much for very enlightened questions.
Okay, thank you. One last question from Dr. Angela Faram. Angela, please unmute yourself.
Thank you so much, Ma'am Afia. Sir, I'm here once again, but this time I'm going to ask you 2 questions on behalf of my colleague, Ms. Tamina Asad from PIDE Lahore office, since Wi-Fi is not working there well. So I think her first question very much aligns with your previous discussion, but still here I'll read this question out here. The first question is, Is there a corrective measure to fix existing building structure? And the next question is there a way, some device or efficient a certain building is? Thank you so very much.
Uh, Let me recap. You want that if how can we proceed with the existing buildings uh, and improve the uh, energy efficiency in that area and save the energy. If that be the case, then I have explained in my presentation that what we are thinking of is there are three different set of options that we are considering for the conversion of the existing houses which are consuming a lot of energy. And one simplest is to supply air at about 27, 28 degrees temperature to the outer units of your air conditioners. And this will reduce the energy consumption by about 70% or so, and consequently the cost of energy, and also help because the compressor will not be operating under extreme stress, so its life and performance will also improve. So less energy consumption and more efficiency is there. So that basically the start point. The second option is same what we are doing here in the first option, but preventing the loss of the air conditioning energy in this case to the walls. And there I am proposing that if we can insulate the internal wall through by putting some insulation, maybe thermopore 2-inch, and then some paneling, or also putting a coating or paint right on the thermopore sheet. So that will prevent the loss of the energy, the cooling energy into the building structure. So that again, we reckon should add to about 10-15%. And the lastly, I'm saying is that existing building to be we put a wrap around or an insulated envelope along the building and use this building as a storage facility, a thermal storage battery, and it is charged with the air conditioners and all those things which are now operating at a much lower the intake is they're getting at about 28, 29 degrees or 27 degrees, so they're more efficient and they're operating only during daytime. At night times you have stored the energy, so that should suffice as far as I'm concerned for 1 or 2 days. So you're charging your home during daytime mostly with the solar energy, when at night time you're using maybe some fans for air circulation. So that these are the three options, set of options. The third option which I have talked today, we are going to, I think, convert 2 or 3 houses starting maybe next month, and also doing some experiments as far as option 1 and 2 is concerned. So that's where we are going. I think in 3 to 6 months we'll have some more information, and probably I'll request PIDE for another webinar where we'll give you the technical details and more information as far as the solution is concerned. This today's talk was mostly on the conceptual side, which I've tried to explain.
Okay, great. I believe there are no more questions. Thank you so much, Ashra Saab, for the very wonderful presentation, for enlightening us. And thank you all the participants and for their time in their participation. Okay, thank you so much.
I'm grateful. Thank you. I'm honored. It's always a
okay.
pleasure.
Thank you so much.